for me. I was sitting in my bedroom and my dog was downstairs in her crate to stop her from terrorizing my cat, who was downstairs in her crate to stop her from terrorizing my cat, who was asleep in the spare bedroom. Anyways, I was sitting there watching YouTube and TV and writing on a novel, and I kept hearing things go bump in the night. A chain rattle, which I thought was weird, but figured it was just the neighbor's fence. I didn't think it was my fence. Things moving in the backyard. Like raccoons, maybe. Anyways, despite me explaining things away in my head, I still got up with my pistol at my hip and looked out all of the windows and didn't see anything of concern. I had just went through the house and checked all of the angles again and sat back down to try and calm my nerves. Then my not-so-normally vocal dog barked quickly and growled. That's when I started thinking that there really was someone in my yard. See, the thing is, her pen is facing the bay window that leads into the backyard. They would have to be standing on something for them to see her or for her to see them. Someone had to have been peeking in my window. I was shaking, tired, and absolutely terrified, but when I went downstairs to let my 95-pound pup into the yard, I was towing my pistol at my hip. I still was thinking that there was no way someone could be in my yard. I felt like I was overreacting. I let my pup out the door and she instantly started crouching, hair on the back of her neck standing straight up, and a low growl as she crept around the side of the house towards that damned window. I have never seen her like this, and told her to go pee and immediately called her into the house when she was finished. The next morning I wake up, my boyfriend's home, and I start babbling about how I thought someone was in the yard last night. Just talking about it was making me anxious, and he thought I was overreacting, as I'm scared of the dark anyways. He basically dismissed it as a possum or raccoon. I was starting to think I was going crazy, or had just been sleep deprived. We took our pup into the yard to play like usual. We were running around in the yard goofing off. My boyfriend is standing near the house smoking a cigarette and pacing around. As he goes over to the window, I'm kind of watching him now, and he tells me to come over to where he is. My heart sank as he says, "Yeah, I believe you." He points to the window, and right on the sill, on the outside, there is distinct grip marks where someone balanced themselves to look through the rip in the curtains to our living room. I still want to vomit thinking about someone looking into my house, especially as there have been probably 16 break-ins in our neighborhood alone in a couple months or less. Window creeper that surely would have been eaten by my abnormally large dog. Please do not come back. I really don't want to meet you. Back in high school, my friends and I would love to go to our local movie theater that was situated inside of our shopping mall. We usually traveled in big groups, but this time it was only my friend Alex and I. We picked up a late-night showing of some obscure movie. I can't recall the name because this happened years ago. We arrived on time to find our seats. Since the showing was late and the movie wasn't a box office hit, the theater was empty. We situated ourselves in the middle, where we could get a perfect view of the screen. Strangely enough, a couple that arrived late decided to sit in our row with only 2 seats between us and them. My friend and I exchanged confused looks and then shrugged it off, figuring it was solely because we had prime viewing seats. As the theater got dark, things got a little weird. The woman of the pair kept looking over at us every few minutes. The first few times I figured she was just a nervous person and adjusting to her surroundings. Yet, maybe an hour into the movie, she kept up the pattern. She wasn't even discreet with her staring because she'd turn her head completely towards us. I could see her entire face. I still see it in my head today. I nudged my friend and told him about the girl staring, and he whispered that he had noticed too. At this point, I was feeling very anxious, and almost wanted to leave the movie early. My friend didn't want to, though, so I decided staying with him was safer than leaving alone. And I was his ride home, too. Throughout the movie, the girl continued to look over. Every now and then, she'd whisper something to her counterpart, but he never looked over. Once the movie ended, I grabbed my friend by the arm and told him that we should get going because it's late. He followed suit as I sprinted out of the theater. Once we were out, the halls were empty because of the fact that barely any film plays towards the end of the night. I was about to say something to my friend about how the couple next to us freaked me out, but they ran out of the door seconds after us. I was freaking out inside, but I decided to try my best to keep my composure. My friend was definitely aware of them following closely as we walked out of the movie theater, but he isn't the type to be confrontational, so we just sped walked to my car. Once we got in the car, my intuition told me just to get out of the parking garage as fast as I could. I saw the weird couple make it to their blue car, which was on the same parking garage level as us. That wasn't surprising because the entrance to the mall is on that level, so everyone parks there. I sped out of the parking garage and drove towards the main street. I told him to keep a lookout and see if their blue car was following us. He looked back and said the coast was clear. I felt relieved. Now, we were the only ones on the main highway because it was late at night and we live in a quiet suburban area. Then, a few minutes later, a car came speeding up from behind and flashed their high beams at me. My heart started to race. My head just told me it was them. I asked Alex if the car was blue, and he said he couldn't tell. The light to turn left onto the next main street was green, so I took the left turn necessary to get to his neighborhood. The car backed off and turned on normal lights, but still turned left, just like us. I caught a glimpse of the car and started yelling once I realized that it was the weird couple's blue car. Alex told me to gun it, so I slammed on the gas and sped down the main street before I had to turn into his neighborhood. The blue car wasn't tailgating me, but was clearly following not too far behind. When the streets are empty, it's easy to follow someone since there aren't any cars to dodge. I turned into my friend's neighborhood, but decided to drive past his street so that they wouldn't see where we were trying to go. The blue car followed us into the quiet neighborhood and was picking up speed to get closer to us. My friend Alex was panicking and asking what I'm going to do. I just kept quiet as I sped too quickly down a random neighborhood street. I could see the car's lights behind me as I made my turn onto another street, but they were far enough so that they couldn't see me for about 30 seconds after I took that turn. After I turned onto another unfamiliar street, I turned off my car and put it into neutral. My car is a manual, so I'm very familiar with driving it and knew I had enough momentum to roll into an empty parking spot, even though my car was off. I slipped into the spot on the curb and pushed the brakes to get to a stop before the blue car could clear the turn to get onto the street. I reclined my seat back completely and told Alex to lean all the way forward and not to move. We sat there in the silent and dark car, my ears ringing from how quiet it was. My heartbeat was fluttering faster than it ever had before. I think it was a mix of fear and adrenaline. Within a few seconds, the blue car cleared the turn and slowly started driving down the street. It made its way past my car that was parked on the side of the street, and luckily for us, I drive a standard black Scion. There is nothing notable about my car. I haven't even changed the license plate's frame, so they must have figured that the cars parked on the road belonged to the people that lived in the neighborhood. Alex and I literally stayed in our hiding positions for 10 minutes, just in case the weird couple decided to drive by again. Luckily, they never did. Once we got up, we just stared at each other and really didn't know what to say. We were both freaked out and had no idea of what the couple had planned to do if they had caught up to us. To this day, I still don't know what their intentions were. Maybe they were just a couple of deviants who enjoy freaking out young high school students. Or maybe they had a more sinister plan for us. All I know is that I don't go to the theater late at night anymore, unless I'm with a big group of friends.
During the winter, I like to keep my house filled with the smell of a burning fireplace and a massive amount of candles. All you cat owners out there, I feel for you, because you can't really enjoy these winter scents when your home is overpowered by the scent of traditional kitty litter. That's why now is the perfect time to switch to Pretty Litter. Pretty Litter's ultra-absorbent crystals trap odor instantly. Their crystals last up to a month, which means less scooping and fewer trips to the garbage can. There's nothing worse than a midnight trip on a winter's night to toss out the garbage. Pretty Litter's super light crystal base also minimizes mess and dust. Your allergies are going to thank you. Here's the coolest thing about Pretty Litter though. It changes colors to help detect early signs of potential illnesses in your cat, including urinary tract infections and kidney issues. And cats tend to hide their illnesses, but effortlessly keeping tabs on your cat's health is going to give you peace of mind. And Pretty Litter ships free straight to your door in a small, lightweight bag. This means you never run out of it, and you don't have to have this huge container of kitty litter taking up space and stinking up your place. Now, that's a win-win. Make the switch to Pretty Litter today. It's just good sense. Go to prettylitter.com and use promo code MEAT for 20% off your first order. That's prettylitter.com, promo code MEAT for 20% off. prettylitter.com, promo code MEAT. Now back to the show.
To 14 years ago, when I was around 12 or 13, my family had a gathering at my grandmother's house, which we did every so often back then. My brother, cousin, both boys, and I, a girl, were playing in an inflatable pool in the backyard. The neighbor kid, probably my brother's age, about 15 or 16, climbed his fence so he could talk to us. We were having fun joking and chatting with him, so we asked if he'd like to join us. My grandma gave me the okay, and he came over to partake in the festivities. Everything was great until my cousins and brother went inside to help with something. I got nervous when they left, but I'm socially an anxious person who is especially nervous around guys, so I pushed it aside. Suddenly, the cool kid from next door became a jerk. He started hurling insults at me while grinning. I figured he was just playing around, so I did it back. We started splashing each other, but then he got super aggressive. He was splashing me so much, I kept taking in water, turned my head away and told him to slow down, still kind of laughing. When he didn't stop, I got serious and told him to knock it off. He stopped. I was clearing my eyes of water when he grabbed the bucket and he filled it with water and put the bucket on my head. I went to take it off, but he shoved me down. I got the bucket off and asked what is wrong with him. He He just grabbed me and shoved my head underwater. I was flailing, searching for his face to scratch or hit, but the angle he was at made it impossible. I got dangerously close to passing out when he was pulled off of me. I came up grasping for air, and my brother pulled me behind him and asked the kid what the hell was going on and what he was doing. The little douche snickered and said we were just playing. My brother stepped forward and asked how trying to drown me is playing. The kid kept smirking, and my brother told him he needs to stay away from us. The kid scoffed and angrily said, "You guys are boring anyway," and was escorted out by my sibling. We never said anything to the adults, for reasons I can't understand, but the kid kept taunting us in his backyard. He even brought one of his friends to mock us and insult us, which resulted in us telling our family, so that stopped real quick. Shortly after that, the family moved and we never dealt with him again. I'm very grateful for my brother who essentially raised me. He's helped me in more ways than I can count. I don't know where I'd be without him. When I was 15 years old, I lived in a rural area about 20 minutes outside of the actual town I called home. I was home from school alone one day, and a white car pulled up in front of our mailbox and stopped. I was upstairs in my room and saw from the window, but I couldn't see who was in the car. Whoever it was sat there for several minutes without getting out of the vehicle, long enough to weird me out, and then drove away. We were not super close in distance to our neighbors, but we weren't miles and miles apart, and I remembered that one neighbor a bit down was selling their house. I chalked it up to a potential buyer having the wrong address or simply checking out the neighborhood, and thought nothing else of it. Fast forward about a week or so. It was Friday night, and I had gone downtown to see the premiere of a movie with my boyfriend at the time. I remember it was a special occasion, and I had begged my parents consistently for weeks to push back my curfew so I could see this movie. Since it wouldn't be over until after 1 a.m., and it took 20 minutes to get home from town, they were reluctant but finally agreed. When the movie was over, my boyfriend Jason and I walked slowly to the truck. It was a well-lit and relatively safe area, so we stood around in the parking deck trying to push curfew for as long as possible. There weren't many vehicles at that time of night, but I realized suddenly that I recognized the one parked straight across from us. That same white car that had been at my house a week earlier. The car was running, and there was a man, maybe mid-30s, sitting alone inside. I could have passed all of this off as a coincidence, except as I continued to look at him, he turned his bright lights on us and spun out of the parking deck after almost running into Jason's truck. I obviously had a horrible feeling about this and asked Jason if he would take me home immediately. As we pulled out of the garage, we saw the car parked across the street from the movie theater, all the lights off, man still inside, but he didn't follow us, so we just went home a little shaken. I had no idea at that moment this was the start of 3 long and torturous years of being stalked by this man. A couple of months after the parking deck situation, the encounters became more frequent and weirder, and I hated being anywhere alone at any time. I never knew when or where I would see him, or how much time would have passed between encounters. It all became clear that he was watching me all the time by this point, because he only made himself known when I was alone or with my boyfriend, never my parents or even any other friends. I became terrified, for some stupid reason, that none of my friends would believe me if I told them, so I kept it between Jason and my family. Until one day, my friend Rachel, who lived maybe 5 minutes away from me, started telling me about this creepy man who showed up at her house over the weekend. Rachel's dad worked Sundays, so she was home alone with another friend of ours, Megan. Everything was normal until around dusk, when they began to smell cigarette smoke. My heart instantly began racing because, by this time, this was becoming an everyday occurrence for me. I was smelling cigarette smoke, finding cigarette butts around my house, even though none of my family smoked, and could never trace a source. I had a nagging feeling, of course, that it was connected to my stalker, but hadn't confirmed it. So as Rachel and Megan were looking for the source of the smoke, Rachel realized she had left a window in the back room open and the smoke was coming in from their back porch. Seeing that there was a strange man on her porch, she quickly goes to close and lock the window, and, in her words, he turns around with dead eyes and looks straight through her, like she wasn't really there. Megan immediately called the police, but Rachel continued to stand there in a little bit of shock as he smirked at her and stared until his cigarette was done, then got up and calmly walked away.
Alright, bye y'all. Thanks for joining the live.
Except for cigarette butts.